Welcome, ladies and gents, to our fireside chat. We're doing something a little different today. Usually I make videos on helpful topics about how to write certain things or how to create certain characters, how to do certain things in writing. But today I thought that I would talk to you about my writing projects and give you a bit of a September update on how everything is going. As promised in last week's video, I have a super exciting announcement. Drum roll, please. I have a new website! At the beginning of the summer, I put up a temporary website on Squarespace, and now it has gotten a makeover. Also, I included a bunch of cool new features, like a countdown to the release date of the first book in my paranormal horror series, which is coming out on July 13th, 2021. So get hyped for July 13th. I'm super hyped for July 13th. It is officially now my new favorite day of the year. And speaking of my paranormal horror book, that's kind of what I'm here today to discuss. So for those of you who don't know, or for those of you who are new to my channel, I'm currently writing a paranormal horror book. I'm pretty sure it's a paranormal horror book. I'm still trying to figure out the genre. It's also a mystery, so I guess it could be a thriller, but I really love this story, and I got what would become the idea for it when I was doing NaNoWriMo my freshman year of college. I'd never really been a big NaNoWriMo person. I don't know why. NaNoWriMo is super up my alley, but every time that NaNoWriMo came about, I was already working on another writing project. And because it was already in progress, I didn't feel the need to start it over again or start another project. I used NaNoWriMo to celebrate book writing in my head, kind of in the way that I did other months that are dedicated to things. Like, yay, it's novel writing month, and like, yay, it's Women's History Month. But I chose to go to college at Kenyon College, which is a very small liberal arts school and filled with writers. It was a little weird because you had a lot of people who were pretty sporty and then a lot of people who had gone there like me to do creative writing. So some people were chill creative writers and other people wrote their essays on typewriters, and writing on typewriters seemed to be their entire personality. Nobody around me was doing NaNoWriMo, but just being in that environment and thinking about writing all the time, not that I don't think about writing all the time, but being surrounded by people who were, urged me to try it. I traveled to Norway this summer before college with my family, and while I was there we visited the Henrik Ibsen Museum. I don't know why, but I really loved the Henrik Ibsen Museum. I thought that it was super cool. I thought that learning all about Henrik Ibsen's life was really cool. I did a bit of a deep dive into Henrik Ibsen's plays, and while we were in Norway, I got the idea for this book about a girl and her grandfather who owned a Henrik Ibsen traveling museum exhibit and toured it around the United States. The mechanics of how that touring worked were a little vague, but essentially I took that nugget of an idea and built a book around it. It was the most melodramatic book I've ever written in my life. Just off the top of my head, I can tell you there were 4 deaths, 5 ritual sacrifices, some gang violence, a hotel fire, an apartment fire, lots of fires. One of my main characters died. One of the school administrators was kidnapped by the villain, and the FBI did not take notice. There was also a cult. I wrote in a cult where everybody in the cult met once a month to recite poetry that they just wrote in their heads on the spot. It was a secret society, but it was basically a cult. Their whole thing was about connecting words to the intensity of experiences and finding out really what it means to be human. I don't know, it was weird. So that novel died for about a year. I ended up transferring colleges. I now go to Tufts University. I spent my sophomore year working on a book that I'd started 2 years before going to college that I was still in love with and still am in love with and actually still working on. I'm gonna write that for my senior thesis this year. I'm gonna finish it this year. It's gonna come out next year. Then at the beginning of my junior year, I decided that I wanted to write a different book because I was getting a little sick of the one that I was writing before. And so I revisited that book that I wrote for NaNoWriMo, and I figured out the parts of it that I actually really liked and built a whole new separate plot around the parts of it that I liked. The parts of it that I liked were the 3 main characters, the overall general mystery, and pretty much nothing else. I had one character in that book who was an extremely minor character who just happened to have the ability to see ghosts, and this was not relevant to the plot or explained at all in any other parts of the book. She was in like 3 chapters and it just said that she could see ghosts, but nobody else noticed or cared. That's another part of the book that I really liked. I brought that part out and made it basically the entire premise of this book. So, my paranormal thriller is about a girl named Shiloh Olsen. She is 16 years old. She has lived in a tiny town in Ohio her entire life. She has a 6-year-old brother named Max, who is the love of her life, and a dad who is the sheriff of their county and also domestically abusive. Her dad is just really, really awful and does some really terrible things to her and Max. So Shiloh vows that when she turns 18, she is going to run away from Ohio with Max and take him somewhere safe. But at the beginning of the book, Max goes missing. Meanwhile, you have another 16-year-old girl named Rochelle who has the ability to see ghosts. She's had this ability all of her life. She can see ghosts and she can speak to them, but she can't touch them. On the day that Shiloh's little brother goes missing, Rochelle is in the cemetery and hears the ghost talking about this mysterious man wearing a long green coat who came to the cemetery the night before looking for someone. This man can also see ghosts, and Rochelle has never heard of anyone in her life who can see ghosts except for her. Rochelle sets out to go find the man in the long green coat because she wants to go find someone else who can see ghosts. Shiloh, because the police have no leads, sets out to go find Max. Around the middle of the book, Rochelle discovers something horrifying, connecting the man in the long green coat's sudden appearance in town to the disappearance of Max. She learns that Max is going to be murdered and that this man has really dark and twisted plans, so she has to go convince Shiloh that ghosts are real, and Shiloh and Rochelle have to go hunt this man down. I turned the book into a horror book. It didn't used to be a horror book. It was just a mystery when I wrote it freshman year. But now the book is filled with ghosts and necromancy and Shiloh's abusive father and her having to dig through all of her trauma, and it still has all of those cute boys that were in the original draft, and she and Rochelle become besties and have to solve this mystery. I essentially took my original draft and turned it into a more dark and twisty version of itself, raising the stakes and making it way more exciting to read. I love this story. I love writing it. I love thinking about it. I'm so excited for it to come out next year. I'm currently about halfway done with a third draft, and as soon as this draft is done, I'm gonna send it to beta readers. As is the case with most writing projects, I'm really loving doing some things and also really struggling with some things. I really love the characters. The more time that I spend with them, the more I like spending time with them. I keep uncovering new things about their histories and the way that they react to things, and every draft that I do, they become more like living, breathing people in a way that I really enjoy. Another good thing is that I'm starting to make the book pretty. Not completely pretty, because I'm going to do another draft just to make it pretty while it's with beta readers, but prettier than it was. I'm adding symbols, I'm making the writing more sophisticated, I'm making it seem more like a book that I want to read and less like a story that I was just jotting down that I had in my head. I'd fallen into a bit of an editing rut in the past couple of weeks, but now I'm climbing out of it, which is making me really happy. But something that I've been honestly struggling with is that when you spend this much time with a book, it gets really hard to see it from a reader's perspective. I'm obsessed with the book, I love it to death, but this is the first time in my life where I'm writing with so many deadlines and with so many goals in mind. I'm sticking to a schedule and I'm really focusing on that schedule, so it's making it harder for me to take breaks and for me to distance myself from the book in between drafts. I haven't written this fast before, and I know that I'm gonna have to learn how to write this fast consistently if I want to publish 2 books a year, but it's still pretty new for me, and that's making it hard. The book I wrote before this took me 5 years to write, and I'm still working on it. I'm gonna write it for my senior thesis. I start that this month. So I'm still trying to see how fast I can feasibly go. I know that I'm probably never gonna be a rapid release author, and it's kind of hard seeing all these people around me all the time churning out a book a month, but I keep telling myself that it's because the worlds that I'm building are complicated and require more thought. And I'd also prefer to put a book out there that was high quality than one that was lower quality, just because I was forcing myself to write it faster than it would naturally be written. But all that being said, I'm so excited that I have a release date for this book. It's absolutely going to be ready, and as soon as I finish this draft, I'm going to start planning the second one and have that up for pre-order by the time the first one goes out. I'm also learning how to plan a book launch. I didn't plan it very well last time I did it, and I want to do it better this time. I know it's not going to be perfect because it's the first time that I'm going to do it, but I'm hoping that after a couple of times and releasing the whole series and then starting a new series, I already have an idea for the series that I'm going to write after I finish this one, and I love that idea and I'm excited to talk to you about it, but that'll probably have to wait. I'm also working on my marketing copy. If you go to my website, click on books, and then click on the cover for this upcoming horror book, you will be able to read the blurb that I wrote for this book, and I really like it, and I'm very excited about it. That will give you what the book's about without all of my rambling. Oh, and titles. Can we just take a minute to acknowledge how difficult it is to title a book? For my first book, I had a stroke of divine intervention because I knew what that book was going to be called even before I started writing it. But for the one I started 5 years ago, I didn't title that book until last year. I have no idea what this book is going to be called. This part of the video is going to be funny to look back on next year when the book has a title, but how do you title a book when you don't have one thing or place in the book that the entire story is about? Like The Hunger Games was about the Hunger Games. This book has things in it. It has a mysterious man in a long green coat, and a creepy old cemetery, and main characters with names. But I still have no idea what I'm gonna call it. So I have to work on that. If you guys are all fantastic at titling, I'm super jealous. Okay, rant over. So yeah, that's basically where I'm at. That's my September writing update. I start my last year of college on Tuesday, which feels kind of surreal. It's gonna be weird going back to school with COVID happening, but I guess we'll see how it is next week. I'm gonna start my senior thesis also pretty soon, and for that, I'm writing a completely separate book. So I'm gonna have both of these projects going at the same time for a while, which I don't typically like to do. I like to focus all my energy on one, but you gotta do what you gotta do, and I need to get this book off to beta readers. I cannot wait to revisit the book that I'm gonna write for my thesis. That book is so near and dear to my heart, and basically stayed with me as I grew up all through high school. Most of all, I'm excited for people to finally read it. This book has been such a long time coming and just needs to be done. But that's it for this video. Go check out my website if you haven't already, and read the blurb of the book that I've been talking about for the past however many minutes. I will be back next week from my home office once classes have already started, and that will be interesting. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want more updates for how this book and my other writing projects are doing, as well as helpful how-to videos on different parts of the writing process. And also follow me on social media. I have all of my links below. Have a good week, guys.